Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our ACLA meeting for this week. We are very privileged to welcome back our brother Paulo-Juarez Pereira to continue with his testimony that he started last week. Last week, he didn't know we were going to ask him to come back, but since he only got up to, it was actually several decades ago, in his testimony, we wanted to give him a chance to share more. It was very inspiring and enlightening. And I think actually it made me reflect about my own life and when I was young and the things that I went through. And I think hopefully everybody too can think about how God has worked in their life to prepare them for where they are now. So let's welcome our brother Paulo. Hi, Paulo.
Hello, everybody. Hi, and thank you for coming. I was saying the other day that the other time that you can look at a big trunk filled with huge albums, okay, but each album has a photo at a cover. So you take the album and there is a photo, you talk about the photo, that's or you can begin to flip through the pages, and that becomes, you can extend any point, you can extend more and more. So you begin with a simple page, two pages like this, and eventually that could be developed into a book. And what is written in red is what I added to last time. And I'd like to say a few words about the Vatican Council. We spoke about it last time, especially in view of the fact that Pope Benedict the 16th just passed away. And for me, being a seminarian and studying philosophy, and then in Rome studying theology, we had a lot of hope for the Vatican Council, for the possibility that perhaps there could be changes in the church. And in my case, I was very interested in having the church approach a bit more to the Protestant model, which is to allow the ministers to have a family. He talks about love and family all the time, and it would be nice if they had a family to have some experience with having children and raising children. Of course, that was not to happen. And then there was an exodus from the Catholic Church at that time. A lot of young seminarians my age, early 20s, decided to leave. Now, today I'd like to tell you about my experience in working this out with God. As I said, the Holy Spirit had been guiding me and put in my hands a book written by a German author, translated. I believe I read it in Italian. And in this book, the author was hammering again and again on the importance of the marriage, and also of the Holy Spirit having a more feminine power in God. And of course, going back to Genesis, I believe it's in chapter 2, which I think it's chapter 2. Where God says that it's not good for men to be alone. And I also mentioned that I went to Ireland for the summer because I wanted to learn English, and they spoke English in a way that I found more approachable from my way of understanding. So I went there, stayed for about almost 2 months, had a very good experience. Learned, took a course in English, and in that course there was one of my classmates was a woman from Italy, and I fell in love with her. it was all it was all on my side. There was no she she never knew any of that. We're just friends. But all this time, so I took one more year, and all this time I was talking to God about whether it was the right decision. And also, I began to promise God that if later I found out that I had made a mistake, that I would go back. I said, well, this doesn't really happen. People don't go back, but it's the best I can promise now. So when I was in Vietnam, I began, I was there for a full year. And then at 100 days prior to discharge, I began to make that condition, a 1 mile, run 1 mile per day. And this mile, I will ask angels to run with me. And then I would then knock at the door of heaven, ask and request and everything else, asking God to give me a sign or to give me a direction, because I said I don't know what else to do. I said I'll go back if I feel it's the right thing. So I have to make a decision now. This is the time to make a decision, because when I go back to the United States, it's like being reborn. It's like being reborn. All of a sudden, from being somebody who has a very structured life, all of a sudden I have this ocean of choices in front of me. So if something is going to happen, it has to happen shortly after I leave. I can't take off in some direction hoping that, I have to do the right thing right away. And as I said last time, it was the first night, I got in, got my car, kept my car in a friend's house for a year, got the car, and found a nice apartment on 47th Avenue, if you know San Francisco, 47th Avenue, okay, which is walking distance to the beach, and paid $120 per month for rent. And then so okay, I'm settled. Let's go out and see the world. And I went to the Foreign Student Center. As I said before, there was that ticket that we get $1.50, and the Moonies were there playing music. And so yes, I danced with my spiritual mother, Kathy Sato. She was my spiritual mom, and I think some of you may know her. And I was dancing with her, and she was talking about building a better world. I said, well, that's interesting. I think about these things. And of course, I won the ticket to go up to Boonville for a free weekend of listening to Divine Principle. And it was interesting. I was very interested in the movement because of the people. I like the people. So sometimes I thought, my gosh, they're kind of a bit of clueless. They don't really know what they're talking about. Because I had studied philosophy and theology, so I had, but they're very nice. And but there was something else they did, that they liked my way of singing. I used to come, so they invited me, called, Paula, can you come and sing some song for us? So I was there, So I in Rome, there was a popular choir, and the director of the choir was the same guy that did all the choir for the Basilica, St. Peter's Basilica, for the Pope. And he did that as a volunteer thing, and anybody could go, and I was part of that choir. So they liked the way I sang, and I like the food. I mean, I think Alan knows very well what I'm talking about. They were good at doing very good food, and hey, you can't beat that. And of course, there was something I like about the divine principle was because it made marriage and the blessing as central. Right away understood this is like going to God and having the marriage at the same time. I wanted it seemed like I had to choose one or the other. If you're going to be a priest, you can't have the marriage. Pope said after the council, no, you can't. But now these people are saying, well, the marriage is the path to God. So I kind of like that. So I was doing the going back, but in terms that I found very interesting, very pleasant, and very good. Plus, I like the idea that they always talk about creating an ideal city, ideal country, and leadership, and all that. All that sounded so very good to me. So I felt I was fulfilling my promise to God. So if I find this is not the right way, I'll go back. So that was a little bit more information about that, the Holy Spirit guidance that I felt at that time. And then on the second page, there is another album that I like to open. And that's the album of going to Brazil as a missionary in 1973. That was 2 years before the great influx or outflux of missionaries of 1975. I was part of that too, because I went to take Mr. Sudo's, was it 40 days, 40-day lectures? I think it was 40 days, that preparing the missionaries. So I was part of that group as well. But speaking specifically about the 1973, I arrived in Brazil. I fasted for 3 days. I got a room, and it was a very humble room, but it was cheap. And then bought a ticket, got into a bus, went to my hometown, which is about 8 hours away by bus in a different state. If you know Brazil, it's the state of Minas Gerais. So I went from Rio to Minas Gerais. And of course, immediately I began to speak to them about the divine principle. And my family thought, my gosh, the guy has become Protestant. He is a Protestant. I said, no, this is not a Protestant. And my younger brother, José Bonifácio, he began to take notes. He was a lawyer, so he took good notes. And then he created a brochure, and that brochure made by my brother became the foundation of lectures that I gave in Rio as we began to expand the movement, the church. And anything that I needed, if I needed something, if I needed something made copies of, if he had a friend who worked for the newspaper and he could arrange for me any kind of supplies that I needed. He would pay for it, or he will find a way. So that was my brother Bonifacio. He's still there. Every Wednesday they do hondoke with my sister. It was interesting that Mauricio Baldini, raise your hand if you know who Mauricio Baldini is. Fred Maca knows. Okay. He was a hard nut to crack. And in Brazil, we say, a homegrown saint doesn't make a miracle. Maybe in English, you might have something similar to that. If if you're going to pray for a new saint, you have all that faith. Oh my goodness, if it's the same saints that you had there all the time, you don't expect any miracles. And I was a homegrown saint. I was the same same guy, their uncle. But then, and later, and I'll tell you how we got there, but we got 3 missionaries from Brazil, and one of them went to my hometown. And this guy was so good, couldn't speak Portuguese, but he was so good. And then he brought Mauricio across. It was one day I was speaking to Mauricio about the coming of the Messiah and the historical stages, and his I saw his eyes. His eyes were, it's like he had seen a vision. So I said, yeah, therefore, I'd like to invite you to come. He says, I'll go with you. But all the work had been done by that Japanese missionary. He brought him across. But Mauricio considers me to be his spiritual father. So I'm very honored by that. So I did witnessing in my state, Minas Gerais. And my Aparecida Baldini is his mother. She is my second sister. There was one elder than her, Lourdes. Lourdes, number 1, Aparecida, number 2. So Aparecida, the mother, she became so faithful. She's always preaching divine principle everybody she can. Went to Korea for the blessing. Her husband is now in the spirit world. But a lot of that from that initial work that the Japanese missionary did. So here I am. There was one thing I'd like to say. When I began to expand my work in Rio, I sent a report back to San Francisco because I was there in San Francisco, and then Mrs. Che wrote back to me and said, "You should send this report directly to Father, because now you are under Father." So I did. And in this report, I followed the same excuse me. I followed the same pattern of the report. I forgot which book of the Bible. There were, maybe you remember, there were several people that went as spies, and only 2 gave a very positive report. And I gave a very positive report about Brazil. And I got no answer. But then in 1975, I went to Korea for the blessing. Then we went to Japan. And in Japan, Father was beginning to have the report from each country that was there. Was an international movement, international meeting. And then when it came my turn, and he was preparing to send 1 American and 1 Japanese and 1 German to each country. It was going to be the 1975 big wave of missionaries. But for Brazil, he said, I'm not going to send a German to Brazil. But and I'm not going to send just 1 Japanese. I'm going to send 3 Japanese to Brazil. And he asked me, well, how much time do you spend teaching? I said, well, I have to work. I work, then I teach in the evening. He said, why don't you do this? Why don't you work 1 hour a day? I was like a private teacher or teaching at the school. And then the rest of the time you witness and teach. And the Japanese will come and they will help you so that you don't have to worry about the finances. And sure enough, in the due time, the 3 Japanese came. I don't know if you ever heard their names, the ones, but it was Toru Nishiwaki, Koji Ozeki, and Tomoishi Sogo. I always think of them fondly because they dropped everything, the comfortable life in Japan, and ended up going to Brazil. Sometimes they had like a 1-bedroom apartment in order to save money. And they were selling ginseng tea. And on that basis, making money with the ginseng tea, we began to expand. But something else happened. There was a Korean gentleman that we met when we were all getting together to watch a show by the Little Angels in São Paulo. And there he was, and he said, I am from the 430 couples. I'm a missionary from 430 couples, but I was re-blessed in 1975 with 1,800 couples. And we couldn't believe it. We just met this guy. Excuse me. And there he is. He's telling us, he's from 430 couples, and he just came from Korea. And he says, I came here to help. Well, we couldn't believe it. That's such a good luck that we had. And so we began to congregate our effort for São Paulo, because there was a lot of Japanese, and with the 3 Japanese missionaries, they could go to the Japanese community and sell them ginseng tea. And they were all interested in ginseng tea. And so that was a good place to make a lot of money. So all of a sudden, the movement began to grow. So this is one part I would like to tell you about how lucky that we were. We had these people there. And so I went from Rio to São Paulo. And then eventually I went to Barrytown. I went to Barrytown. There was a letter that came. The father was looking for students. So I said, I'd like to go. And they approved it. I went to Barrytown for the Unification Theological Seminary of 1977. We we got our and that's a different story. But I did go from there to the seminary and open up a new vista for my activity with the church. Okay. One more point I'd like to say was my work with Causa. It was interesting. There was just one day I had graduated from Unification Theological Seminary, and I was there. We had two classes of, it was 7-day workshops, okay? There was a gentleman a brother by the name of Peter, and the other one was Paulo. And so we have 2 joint classes. And we had a slightly different methodology. I was go out there, and Peter is very pious, so it was kind of different. But I was really enjoying the program. They had these vans out in the streets, bringing the people to the 7-day workshop. And then one day one of the Korean leaders came to me and said, Paulo, we like the work you're doing, but we would like to congregate the two workshops. And because Peter had been here before, he's older than you in this, has more experience than you do. We decided to give Peter the directorship of the lectures for 7-day workshop. Is that okay with you? I said, oh yes, fine. I was absolutely demolished. So I went for a walk. You know, if you know Barrytown, it's at 200 acres, and we had made a path. I went for a walk and I prayed. And in one of those moments, you know, said, by God, what am I going to do? When I came back from that walk, Tom Ward, Dr. Tom Ward, perhaps you have heard him, Causa. He came running to me. He said, Paulo, I was looking for you. So I went for a walk. And then Tom asked me, Paulo, are you busy? I said, Tom, you have no idea how unbusy I am. He said, well, Father is putting together a group to go to Korea and to start teaching VOC in South America, and your name came up. Would you like to go? I said, yes, I would like to go. I was totally amazed by that. So we prepared. We went to Korea for a 21-day workshop with Dr. Lee, and study unification thought. And unification thought was going to be the foundation of our counter proposal to communism in Latin America. Now, there was one thing I noticed about Dr. Lee. He seemed to understand what I said pretty well, because when I spoke with him, I would simplify my way of speaking for the following reason. I used to teach beginners English in Brazil. So if you teach beginners English, you learn how to speak in a way that, you know, you're always looking at the person to find out if they are registering what you're saying, right? And he I think he found my way of speaking easily. Anyway, he asked me if I could give you a representative lecture representing the group for the graduation. I said, fine. And then after that, he came to me and he said, I was wondering if you could stay back for a few weeks, and we would like to publish a new version of unification thought. And I went to talk to Colonel Bohi Pak, and I said, well, Dr. Lee has asked me, and this book will be helpful for the cause of work. He said, Paulo, you stay. And then it was a few weeks, turned out to be 1 month, and then turned out to be 2 months, and it was 2 months and a half. Every time I had to write to Colonel Park, and then eventually Dr. Park said, you don't have to write, just stay as long as you have to. So based on that, I was able to go back, and then we had the Unification Thought book that was published eventually with the help of Dr. Pak and not Dr. Pak, Reverend Kwak, who gave the money and for publishing. And then after that, there were other books that we did too, including The End of Communism, but several books. but that was, for me, it was very good, because I was doing that work. I had to read, to read everything and make changes here and there. We had a group of people that were helping out, and so at the same, so that was very helpful for the counter proposal to communism. If you go to talk about communism, anybody can make a critique. The thing is, how, what are you going to offer, you know? And I would say, look, I do have issues that we need to consider for capitalism. You'd say, well, capitalism is not ideal. Say, correct. But today is not the day to speak about capitalism. One day we'll speak about capitalism, you know. Today I am speaking directly about communism. And we went to, Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Nicaragua, El Salvador, of course, Brazil, Argentina. I was in Argentina one time giving lectures, and then all of a sudden I came down for breakfast, and they said, Argentina is in war. I said, what? Yeah, there is a war about the Malvinas. I don't know if you remember the Malvinas. When somehow the leader of Argentina was trying to get the Malvinas away from England, and England sent an armada there to take. So eventually they had to give back to England. You know, they were not able to maintain to liberate for Argentina. But it was going to Brazil, making the decision to go from Brazil to the seminary, that opened up those opportunities for me to do the work of causa. And I'd like to also find out how quickly the movement grew in Brazil. The contingent from Minas Gerais, including especially Maurício Baldini, they were so effective in fundraising and also in gaining people. So it became like a machine. We had 7 days, 21 days workshop continuously. And then there were some issues around 1980 or so, that they were persecuted by the government. But that is a story for another day. So there it is. You know, you look at a big trunk filled with albums. Each album has a photo at the cover. You can talk a little bit about that, or you can flip the pages, and all of a sudden you have so much more to talk about. And I would like to stop here to see if there is any questions. Also, remember, the deal is that you know, by listening to somebody else's life story, you can think about your own, and perhaps someday you can also tell your story. Thank you.